Obviously, today's a big day because this is a presentation as part of the DEOL program consultancy project, which is a presentation that comes off of an executive summary that Jade has put together over the last few weeks. And it is the capstone for this program. So just as a background for everybody, the DEOL program is based on a scholar practitioner model. And it is, sounds simple, but it's really a lot more complicated. But basically, it's the classwork, it's the scholarship, and then they are asked to partner with an external organization for a period of the 3 years they're in the program in order to tackle a significant challenge, but mainly to develop their personal and professional leadership skills along the way. So today we're at the end of that journey, or getting to the end of that journey for Jade. And so she's going to be presenting. Just so you know that all of the capstone process follows the Project Management Institute's PMBOK body of knowledge. And so all the students follow that 4-part process as they go through with the milestones. And so while our students do not normally sit for project management certification, they certainly can, but they do follow those principles and they do follow that terminology. You should have available to you today a copy of the executive summary, digital copy of that. You're not required to have that open for the presentation, but that is just for your reference if you have any questions about anything. So we're ready to turn it over to Jade. And before I do that, Jade, the only question I have for you is, as questions arise in your presentation, would you prefer those to be asked along the way, or would you like for us to wait until the end of your presentation?
The end, please.
Okay, that's what we'll do. So at this time, I'll mute my microphone, and Jade, will turn it over to you, and you can begin your presentation.
And I just wait for you to share the screen.
Yeah, you should have an option there at the bottom to share the screen.
Okay. Is everyone good?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. So welcome to my presentation on enhancing board governance and engagement at the Upcountry History Museum. So the museum is located in Greenville, South Carolina, in an area designated as Heritage Green, which is an urban arts and cultural campus. It includes the Greenville County Museum of Art, the Greenville Theater, the Greenville County Museum System, Library System, the Children's Museum of the Upstate, the Carolina Music Museum, and the Upcountry History Museum. So the museum is responsible for collecting, maintaining, and telling the history of 15 counties that make up the upstate of South Carolina, previously known as the Upcountry. And the mission of the museum is to connect people, history, and culture. Currently, the organizational structure, there are 8 full-time employees, and they are governed by a 23 voting member board of directors. So I met initially with Dana Thorpe, CEO, and Elizabeth Gunther, who was Director of Education and Programs. And during this meeting, it was stressed the need for a guidance in board development and engagement. The board had recently undergone some significant changes. They had added 8 new members, and these new members were sought after or recruited specifically for their relationships with prominent organizations in the Greenville area, with the hopes that the addition of these members would increase financial support for the museum. And there also you had the new membership versus old membership in a way, new members coming in with new ideas and maybe some ways that they wanted to change specific to the way that board meetings were currently being held, but wasn't really a definitive plan. And I think that there were some apprehensions and maybe some tensions created. So we began to look at the idea of board members taking the ownership and accountability with a specific challenge of how to ensure that highly qualified board members are willing to work on behalf of the museum beyond board meetings and become ingrained in the operations of the museum. And Dana and Elizabeth actually had a specific request that we look at creating and implementing a committee structure for the board. So a literature review was conducted related to board development and board engagement and looking at what best practices would be. And the overarching theme presented in the research conducted was the idea of assessment, an assessment of multiple areas, and 4 really stuck out in the evaluation of the research, and those were related to external environment, the collective group, characteristics of individual board members, and organizational leadership. So working within the idea of the external environment, so environmental conditions are always changing, and these changes will directly impact the needs of the organization, including the skills and the expertise needing on a board of directors. And once you identify the needs of the organization and what individual members need to bring to the board, the board of directors must have the capacity and take on the responsibility to guide the organization and keep it competitive. And then within the element of the collective group arose the concept of prestige. Organizations want prestigious board members on their boards, and the more the merrier, but the problem sometimes comes in with not clearly defining what prestigious means, and also not recognizing or understanding the immediate needs of the organization. And research indicates that prestigious individuals can initially increase group performance for organizations. However, the more prestigious board members are added to a board, that increase seems to or will diminish. And then looking at the idea of characteristics of individual board members, the organizations must understand what their needs are, as well as the cost and benefits associated with the identification, selection, and addition of individual members to the board. And leadership, the organizational leadership needs to assess the strengths and the interests of individual board members and align the board members to tasks that match their interests as well as the needs of the organization. And this will help build identity and connection between the individual and the organization. And the research indicates that one way of achieving this for organizations is actually the implementation of a committee structure. And so committees allow individual members to build skills and work on specific tasks that align with their interests, but it also helps build a collective group working towards achieving success for the organization. And then finally is organizational leadership. And this is where all the responsibility lies for conducting the assessments. And I would be doing my cohort a disservice if I didn't throw in Jim Collins, because I think every time any assignment came up, our answer was getting the right people on the bus and in the right seats. So, organizational leadership really needs to make sure that the right people are in the right spots, and they can do this through the formation of teams, and these teams should be made up of staff members as well as board members to ensure effective selection, training, orientation, and retention of board members. And so ultimately what it comes down in terms of organizational leadership is just knowing the needs of the organization and making sure that you keep the organization competitive. So in terms of working with the museum, our scope here was to lay the foundation for an active and engaged board of directors for the museum. And the organization of my project was, my site supervisor was Elizabeth Gunther, and she was the director of education and programs. We held monthly meetings with each other to establish what the tasks would be completed, the time frames, and to assess the progress of the tasks that we had decided upon. But ultimately, all approval rested with Dana. So some identified successes, if these were achieved or deliverables that I was able to return to the museum, then we were in good shape. So some of those successes included drafting and revised copy of bylaws for the CEO and executive committee, of the museum for the museum to review, creating and submitting an orientation program for new board members, guiding the discussion and implementation of newly formed committees, conducting and reporting on the board assessment. So the activities involved in the project include a SWOT analysis, which was used to examine the internal and external environment of the museum. We also conducted a board assessment with a goal there to get a comprehensive overview of the needs of the museum, processes, and operations related specifically to the board of directors, as well as to gauge their understanding of these areas. Conducted a revision of the current museum bylaws with the hopes of drafting and getting approved an up-to-date document that outlines the bylaws of the museum, which align to industry standards, the development and implementation of a committee structure to create and present a committee proposal that addresses the top needs of the museum. And then finally, the hope was the creation of an onboarding and orientation program for newly elected board members, with the goal to establish a program for new board members that provides precise information needed to be successful and engaged in the work and responsibility of the board of directors. Some potential constraints that that came across during the consultancy. Initially, I believe this pretty much was just the first year of the project. There were a series of board meetings that were not held due to the quorum not being met. My site supervisor, Elizabeth, she did leave prior to the end of the consultancy. Dana stepped in and became my direct contact at that point. I'm going to say delays and lags in communication from the site supervisor due to work priorities, and this is in no way a negative statement. It just simply is that during the school months, the museum is very busy, especially with the elementary schools that come in and visit the museum. And yes, I was there, but the work of the museum, must continue. And then the consultant received limited feedback on submitted documents related to deliverables, and this pertains specifically to the task of updating the bylaws. So risk to the museum, the risk outlined on this slide applied to the museum prior to the consultancy with the idea of maintaining the status quo, or if some or all of the recommendations are not implemented. So you have board members are not active committee members. The museum does not institute or update their onboarding process for new board members. The board does not effectively institute or embrace the newly approved bylaws as the board continues to progress towards an actively engaged and governing board. And the board does not implement the strategies for increasing board engagement, ensure board members are effective representatives of the organization. And ultimately, what would happen is museum leadership and staff will remain the decision makers and the workers of the museum. The board will not be held accountable or take ownership for their duties. The museum is looking toward the future by making plans and preparing for a new strategic plan, and has plans to seek accreditation from the American Alliance of Museums. So an engaged and an active board will go a long way to help ensure the success of these two endeavors. I used the Plan, Do, Study, Act model, which is a 4-stage problem-solving framework during the consultancy. And there's 3 overarching questions here. What is the museum trying to accomplish? How will the museum know that a change is an improvement? And what changes can result in improvement? Ultimately, the museum is trying to accomplish an active and engaged board that takes part in the decision-making and governing processes of the museum. So how will they know that a change is an improvement? And it goes back to the idea of conducting assessments at various levels and on various issues. So conducting assessments of board members and comparing data, looking to see if there's increase in such areas as board membership attendance and board members attending museum events other than board meetings. Is there more qualified candidates seeking placement on the board? Board meetings are held by board members and are not solely for reporting out from the museum staff. And what changes can result in improvement? You have a new board meeting structure, which this has occurred to some degree and in some instances based on my last communications with Dana, a new committee structure which has been implemented at the museum, an active recruiting process for board members that have the skills the museum needs, as well as the ongoing development of the board. So outcome data, talk a little bit about each of these. The SWOT analysis, so it was completed by Dana and Elizabeth. It's included in the appendix of the executive summary. And I'd just like to highlight a couple points that relate specific to the project. Some weaknesses identified were the board lacks clear, definable, and obtainable goals. There's concerns about the ability of the board to move the museum forward. And as previously discussed, museum leadership is looking toward the future and has future goals and aspirations for the museum. And there's also a fear that the pool of qualified individuals is limited, and then that number further gets diminished by the number of organizations in the area that are vying for the same individuals. Then the board assessment, it was provided to members in hard copy as well as emailed out. It was adapted from the Center of Nonprofit Leadership, and we had a completion rate of 65%, which I felt was pretty good. Additional stats to share, also related to the need for board development and engagement at the museum. So 83% of the respondents either agree or strongly agree that the board understands the museum's mission, vision, and service and programs. While it's not 100%, I do think that that's a significant number and a positive indicator. 50% of the respondents were neutral and 8% of the respondents disagree that the board effectively represents the organization and the community. And I think that may go along with the fear that potentially there's not enough qualified people in the area to be board members. 57% of respondents were either neutral in their response or disagreed with the statement that all necessary skills, stakeholders, and diversity are represented on the board. And then 40% of respondents agree or strongly agree that the board is attentive to building leadership capacity on the boards and staff. And 66% of respondents agree or strongly agree the board has a full and common understanding of the roles and responsibilities of the board. Again, while some of these percentages may not be significantly high, I think what it does indicate is that the door actually is open and that the museum has a board that's receptive to board development and a willingness to learn and help move the museum into their future goals. A document review was conducted to help in the updating of the bylaws. And Dana and Elizabeth identified similar organizations for me to reach out to and ask for copies of their bylaws. And those organizations were Tampa Bay Historical Center, Chicago History Museum, the Norman Rockwell Museum, the Reading Public Museum, and the Connecticut Historical Society. So these documents were gathered and reviewed and looked for common themes, and then based on that, suggestions or proposals were offered to help update the bylaws. And then the museum agreed upon the following in terms of a committee structure. So they have a networking committee, a member engagement committee, a communications committee, a finance committee, and an audit committee. And these committees have chairs in place, they have members in place, the purposes of the committees have been identified, the goals of the committees have been identified, and they are up and running and doing the work of the museum. So the reflection piece. As I reflect on the project, I realized the importance of the setup. And I think back to my initial communications with Dana, and I feel that I was clear in what the project objectives were and what the requirements of the DEOL program, but I don't feel that I was clear in defining my role. And as I go back and look at some of those initial emails, I use the term volunteer versus consultant in the initial communication, which I don't think that that adequately represented the level of involvement or expertise that I was hoping to bring to the project or to the museum. And then the second bullet there related to program ideas. I started my professional life as a high school history teacher, and I'm also a lover of history. And throughout this program, history has been kind of coming back to the forefront of my mind. And I have to say, Dr. Martin, especially this semester. So through various conversations with Elizabeth, she mentioned that lack of use of the museum by high school students. And I kind of began to formulate ideas of maybe how to get that population, the high school students or high school teachers, to use the museum, to integrate that into their curriculum, course of study. But I didn't say anything. And I'm kind of left wondering what might have been, but I also was kind of torn between, I didn't want to upset the project that had been established to date. But I'm also reminded of our second class with Dr. Hamilton, where he says, know thyself. And then these three concepts of trust, task, and relationships, they're so intertwined with one another. And there were times that I was frustrated with how slowly things were moving with the project. I'm a high task-oriented individual. However, step back and think about it. And I have to honestly say that throughout this project, I had the opportunity to watch a leader in Dana that understands trust has to exist for relationships to form so that tasks can be achieved. And yes, I showed up wanting to help the museum, but an unintended consequence of my help cannot be harm, which links back to an initial statement in the presentation that ultimately the leader has to protect the organization. And then my strength finders came to mind, which was probably one of my favorite activities in the program. And you can see my 5 there. 3 of the 5 are in the strategic thinking domain, and they're all about gathering information, processing information, thinking about information. And so I have to look back on the work for the museum, and the task aligned well with my top 5. I absolutely enjoyed collecting various documents and information, reading through, finding common themes and best practices, creating something new in regards to the bylaws and the committee structure and orientation. So I think overall, my strengths were well aligned to the task that were completed in the project. And then areas of future study. So I've kind of rolled some recommendations for the museum to continue, which would be the top 3, and then the bottom 2 more specific to me. I hope that the museum continues with the idea of board development and maybe along the idea of board retreats specific to the needs of the museum. And maybe it's more than one retreat that's needed, but I think that would be a good thing for the museum to explore. And then executive committee training. While we were talking specifically about developing the entire board of the museum, I was thinking about executive committee training because the executive committee of the museum is getting ready to undergo some leadership changes and in a positive direction. And those, the new people coming have actually been kind of groomed over the last couple of years to be ready to assume those positions. And I think it may be helpful for some training or some development to continue for the executive committee that could actually impact the overall development of the board for the museum. And the idea of an advisory committee growing from within. And as I mentioned, they have already kind of taken on growing from within, and the leaders that are getting ready to come onto the committee, the executive committee. But the majority of members on the board currently are from Greenville. And there's 14 other counties out there that are represented in the exhibits and histories presented at the museum. And if we look at the concern that there's not enough qualified members maybe in the immediate area, then there's opportunities there to expand the geographic boundaries and maybe go out to the other 14 counties to find some additional leadership or board member candidates. And maybe they aren't a fully voting member. Maybe it's an advisory committee where you do have the opportunity to grow those leaders. And then the last two to speak specifically to me, in the law and policy class, we had to create a policy for our consultancy. And this is probably also one of my favorite activities in the program. And for the museum, I created a equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility policy. And I think just looking at the assignment and what it entails, again, align very well with my strength finders in gathering information, thinking about information, assessing the information, and then applying it to the specific needs of an organization. And finally, adaptive leadership, which is the course that we're in now. And Heifetz and Williams, they take historical figures and historical occurrences, and they apply it to a relatively new concept. And I've just really been drawn to the intersection of history and leadership. And so, Dr. Martin, I'm just giving you a heads up for the next census paper, but I'm thinking about doing something with historical speeches. And given my love for history, I think this is an area that I would like to continue to learn about, and grow in, and study. And then my bibliography here, and the majority of those pertain to the literature review for the project. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Go back. So, Jade, if you would stop your share,
Okay.
we'll go back to full screen. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Hamilton.
All right, so first, thank you, Jade. That's an excellent presentation. I'm going to open up the floor now for any questions on the presentation.
Did that good?
Yes,
That's a good
that was
thing.
very clear, short.
I had
to the
three.
point.
I had three on here, but you answered all three of mine.
I
So.
was checking mine off as we went, so I think you spoke to the things that we asked you to speak to. So, excellent presentation. And I just wanted to comment, since we've gone through the questions, as someone who has served on various volunteer boards, I appreciate the complexity of your project and the difficulty therein. So, excellent job. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to add as a comment too, we've had probably in the last 5 years, we've probably had half a dozen of other projects that were similar, dealing with for impact organizations. Instead of nonprofit, we refer to them as for impact. This is a common issue. Right? It's a common issue with finding board members. In fact, Dr. Martin's project himself was very similar to that as well. So it's very timely. It is also, we all know these for impact organizations are highly influential in the fabric of our communities and are very important. And so this type of work is really impactful. And so, Jade, I want to commend you on taking this on. And I also want to encourage you to not let this be the end of that. There are plenty of other organizations that need assistance in some of the day-to-day things, because again, you know, most of the time when you have a for-impact organization, you have a group of people who share a common passion. They don't particularly share a common skill set in order to focus that passion into one that makes an impact. So you have a specific skill set now that can be of a benefit. So just let me encourage you personally and professionally to leverage that, because you know, the organizations may have a different vision and mission, but the realities of the day-to-day are very similar to that. So congratulations on picking such an impactful project. I'm also very impressed with how you reflected and codified the learnings that you had from this process. Sometimes our students get so caught up in the project that they forget the purpose of the project was the learning from what you took in your classwork and what you were able to apply with your organization. So those are my comments. I'll let others comment, and then we'll move on to the next stage.
Yeah, Jade, pardon me. I had to grin a little bit during my reflection when you mentioned maybe not defining the role as clearly. And I was thinking at the beginning of the project and at the end, if anybody ever does define that correctly from the start, I mean, they've got to have a crystal ball. So that's part of the learning, as Dr. Hamilton already talked about, and it's an ongoing process. I would echo also, stick with board service. A former colleague of mine years ago said there's enough need to go around. There are plenty of organizations that need you to lead. So anyway, wonderful job. Thank you.
Jade, on behalf of the museum, I just also want to extend our deepest gratitude. You were a consummate colleague. We thoroughly enjoyed working with you. The board had tremendous respect for your statements and your work. They realized the need through your efforts. I've been blessed that I've been involved with many history museums across the country for my whole career, and it is board development and board interaction that is critical to the success of an organization. And trying to, if you will, herd all those cats together is really tough. I'm very pleased with the outcomes of your work and its impact on our board. Jade beautifully outlined the progress that we've made based on her work. It continues. As Jade indicated, we have new board leadership. We have a new board chair. Our prior board chair had been in her position for 5 years, and our new chair has served as vice chair. So we have some wonderful continuity that's happening, but it's a new day and it's a new leader, and one who is very in tune with the improvements that need to be made to help in sustaining the museum and having a cohesive group that bring different ideas to the table, but at the same time recognize the challenges, recognize their duties and responsibilities, recognize the fact that I can't show up once a month and feel that I completely am engaged with the museum. The things that Jade outlined, from attending other events at the museum, from getting them to get out there and recruit new members for the museum, just giving them different voices has really, really improved the museum and the board interaction. We actually went, I think a lot of this is based on Jade's work. We had in the prior year been meeting every other month, and that was a new initiative. Before that, we were meeting every month except for 3 months during the summer. So we tried this every other month approach. And at our last board meeting in June, there was a consensus that that didn't work. And we're going back to meeting monthly, because this group now is more involved. They feel more committed. They feel they have more to say, and they want to meet monthly, which is a great thing for us. And so a number of all of these improvements definitely came from her work, her leadership in this role, assisting me, being patient when we could talk and when we couldn't talk, and I'm just very grateful. The outcomes have been wonderful. I couldn't have asked for more.
Thank you.
Thank you for that commentary, Ms. Thorpe. So now that everybody's had a chance to weigh in, we're going to go to the second part of this. So everyone, Jade, you and your classmate David, I'm going to create a quick little breakout room here. Y'all are going to go to a breakout. We're going to do a little bit of tidying up program stuff with Ms. Thorpe, and then we'll invite you and David back in and complete our process that. So don't go far because it'll be just a couple
Okay.
minutes, and we'll have you right back. So give me a second. Let me set this up. Okay, Ms. Thorpe, thank you once again for your commentary, but also your willingness to partner with Gardner Webb and the Organizational Leadership Program. It is a partnership, and we look forward to forging these partners. It helps our students, obviously, with their learning, and I'm going to ask you a few questions about that in a minute, but we also hope that it really impacts organizations that they partner with. So that really is, everybody benefits from doing that. So I'm going to ask you first to just reflect, and you did a little bit already, so you don't have to repeat yourself, but tell me a little bit about, and you'll hear me, I'll say this to Jade when she comes back in. You know, Jade was the real project. You know, they all choose a project to work with, but the real project is their own development from the time they entered the program until they finish. So just reflect a little bit more if you have anything to add to what you've seen in Jade in terms of some skills that she has developed or been able to practice in the time that you've been with her.
Yes, obviously in the beginning, she was a lot quieter, didn't have as many questions, but as we began to build that trust and that relationship together, and I gained a greater understanding of what her goals were,
Right.
we really took off together. And she clicked beautifully with Elizabeth Gunter. And unfortunately for Jade and for us, in 2019, Elizabeth decided to be a full-time stay-at-home mother. But both Jade and Elizabeth had things so well in hand, and Elizabeth and Jade both had kept in communication with me, that it was a seamless transition. And I was very impressed when I had the opportunity to spend more time with her, starting really in that 2019, as to how much more confident she was in the discussions. And actually, instead of waiting for us to lead, she was leading. The assessment that she did and her interpretation of it, and then presentation of her findings to the full board, was done very well. And again, to me, it was more just a growth of her confidence and her understanding, and just, she was very intuitive, read the room very well. And just watching that growth and that development, it really formed into a true partnership.
That's really good to hear. I had Jade's group back the first or second semester they were in the program, and it just, the way it fell out, I didn't have them again. So what you described early on, I saw that, and you know, very introverted, you know, and kind of, but obviously very talented and had a lot to offer. So it's good to hear. It's very gratifying to hear that she was able to demonstrate some growth over that. So when they start the program, we have the handbook that we go over with them, and we talk about specific outcomes that by the time they finish this program, that there are some things that are our goal to happen. I'm going to read through, there's 3 of them. I'm going to read through, and I want you to verify for me if you think we met these with her. So the first one was that our students will make a significant contribution to the organization that they're working with. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yes.
Great. Second one is our students will contribute to the overall learning environment where they are partnering.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And finally, the candidates or students will use their knowledge, skills, and the dispositions acquired to support lifelong learning in their profession. Would you agree?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Well, then really the final question for you is, since we are partners in this, do you know of any reason why we should not confer a terminal degree in organizational leadership to Jade?
No, I do not.
Great. Well, like I said, it is a partnership, and we're in this together. And I want to thank you before I'm going to invite them back in here in just a minute, but I want to thank you again for partnering with us. We take those partnerships are very, very important. And we hope that you won't be a stranger to Gardner Webb, and if that when you have other challenges, as all our organizations always have other challenges, if there's any way I or the university could be any assistance to you, whether it be another intern or another challenge you'd help, just please directly contact me, or you can go through Jade. We'd be more than happy, because we have new students coming into the program every fall. They're all looking for projects, they're looking for challenges, and there's never a shortage of challenges. There may be a shortage of organizations to volunteer their challenges to be worked on. So if there's anything we can do to pay you back for what you've done for us with Jade, just let us know. We would love to be able to do that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the generous offer, and I will be taking you up on it.
Excellent.
Yes.
Again, that's what partnerships is.
Yes.
That's what we want to be able to do. Okay, I've closed the room. Give them a few seconds to get back in here. When she comes back, I like everybody to give her some feedback, not necessarily about the project, but it can be some personal feedback. Give her a chance, as I'm going to welcome her back in for the first time as Dr. Jade Cox. There they go.
Okay.
Okay,
David
Jade,
was looking at me, sorry.
can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
All right, good. Well, asked Ms. Thorpe a few questions. We did a little tidying up in terms of program outcomes and everything, but she agrees with me that you've done excellent work in partnership with her, and we're proud of the work that you've done in the program. So it is my privilege to introduce you as Dr. Jade Cox.
Oh, wow.
Yay. Congratulations.
Wow.
So Jade, what we're going to do at this time, very briefly, we got a little bit of time left. I'm going to ask everybody, I'll go last. I'll ask everybody to give you some feedback. I will close with my feedback, including your charge as a graduate, newly minted graduate of this program, and then we will close with prayer. So whoever would like to go first, I'll finish up.
Jade, I'll start off. We started out together 3 years ago in class with your cohort. I've been honored to work with you and all of your colleagues during this time. I'm most pleased and proud of the work that you've done. I'm also proud of you as a representative of our program. I know that you embody servant leadership and know that you will go forth and make us proud and continue to make us proud with the work that you do as a professional. So again, thank you for the opportunity to work with you, and thank you for choosing Gardner Webb.
Thank you.
Okay, Jade, I still get to work with you a little longer. A little bonus. It's
You mean
great.
my assignments are gone now?
I'm looking forward to them because I know they're going to be outstanding. The other thing I would say is your cohort, I've only gotten to know you recently, but I can see the way that you work together, bond together, and problem solve with each other. Continue doing that afterwards. You will have that network, and I'm guessing Dr. Hamilton will mention this too. You're also part of our network as well. I mean, that's one of those things where when we can support each other, that's what we're looking to do. And again, you're going to leave the program, but never be afraid to recognize that you know stuff. I know that humility is a strength of yours, but it's okay to know stuff, and it's okay to apply that stuff to the organizations that you'll be involved with who need it. So anyway, again, I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you in the short term, and in the long term, as we can serve each other, I hope that we find a way to do so.
Jade, on behalf of the museum, congratulations. So proud of you. I know how hard you've worked on this, and I am so grateful to you for choosing us, for helping us with a definite need. I so hope that we'll have the opportunity to work together again, that our paths will cross. You've become much more than a consultant. You've become a dear colleague, and I just look forward to all the great things that you're going to do. I know we've already benefited from your thoughtfulness, your thoroughness, your professionalism, and I just think about when we met 3 years ago and where we are right now, and I'm just so proud of you. Congratulations.
Thank you for allowing me to hang around for 3 years.
Our privilege, our privilege.
So Jade, today you've been talking about your project, and I want you to know that really you were the project. You could have partnered with
Oh boy.
you could have partnered with any organization, but really the project was you from that first class. And I know Ms. Thorpe made some comment about it, and I know what we've seen your growth over the 3 years of how much you've embraced what your skill sets are and what your strengths are, and how you've been able to leverage those to find not only your passion but also a purpose that you can do others. I just want to reiterate what Dr. Lamb said. Our university is about servant leadership, and you know our motto, "Pro Deo et Humanitate," means for God and humanity, and that. So really, our North Star is if we haven't prepared you to serve God and humanity, then we failed. Even though today is a day of celebration, if we haven't done that, then we really haven't met what our North Star is. So let me encourage you to seek ways to serve. You won't have class anymore, or at least not formal class. You won't have formal assignments, but you do have a responsibility now to give back, to pay forward. So as my advisor told me many years ago, scripture says where much is given, much shall be required. And there's a different expectation level for those of us who have been privileged enough to get advanced and get higher degrees. And that is, we have an obligation to give back and to serve our fellow man. Let me encourage you to embrace that. And as she told me one time, she said, you have to listen carefully to how people ask you questions, because once they know you have a terminal degree, they may ask you a question that they would have asked you before, but before they were asking your opinion, but now they want to know what you know. So make sure you listen to that and not just give an opinion, and that it's okay. And I know Dr. Martin mentioned this too. There's sort of a letdown when you finish your program because, you know, you've been working on this for 3 years and it's all of a sudden it's like, now what? There's also a possibility that you feel like, well, I don't feel like I know everything I need. Well, you're never going to know everything you need to know. But a terminal degree means you know how to learn and you know how to go find that. So it's okay to say, I don't know the answer, but I know how to research. I know how to find it. I know how to make an impact. So I encourage you to take seriously the charge. As a member of the DEOL alumni, you're always welcome here to come back and talk to our students, come back and share. You even have an opportunity to mentor a new DEOL student who's coming in the upcoming fall semester. So if you're interested in doing that, let me know. That's a great way to pay forward your experiences, but it's also a great way for you to continue to sharpen your knife as you go forward, because now you have to lay things in your own path for your own growth. Otherwise, it just won't happen. So on behalf of the university and behalf of the DEOL program, congratulations for this accomplishment. I do think the sky's the limit for you. I think your ability to impact people and organizations can go as far as you want it to go. And I just ask that you stay in touch with us. Let us know all the good things that are happening, the things that you're able to do, and the things that you're able to pay forward, because we're only really successful when you are. And so we look forward to that. So thank you again, everyone, for being here and taking the time. And with that being said, let us close in a word of prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for this day of celebration for Jade and her family. We thank you for all the people that make today possible, for none of us get where we're going by ourselves. As Jade celebrates this day and with her family, as she goes forward, Lord, we ask that you give her a mind for learning, a heart for empathy and compassion, and hands for service to go forth and pay forward the good work now that you have prepared her so well. And we ask all these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. Jade,
Thank
good
you, Rodney.
job. Good job. Stay in touch, okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.